Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Hazards of the Old Ones, Part 2, Chapter 2, A Tearful Resignation. In our last chapter, we looked in on the exploits of Princess Rock, who is shaping up to be an antagonist in the book. We see her arrive in the rainy, windswept shores of the Shade Church, conveniently located under a fallen temple dedicated to Leviatar, who is a Zaffin, not a Zaffin, quote-unquote Zaffin, but she's a Zaffin, a planetary-sized creature feeding on starlight that goes back into the deep lore of the League and the Zaffins. Basically, the people who left the League in 0000000 AX, known as the Great Betrayal, left the League to go serve the Zaffins, who are 5 monstrously sized creatures that look like small moons feeding on starlight. Although their feeding was indiscriminate and dangerous and damaging to any life that happened to be also depending on the starlight they consumed, and it was the League's initial purpose to thwart the Zaffins, and Leviatar was one of them. So that's this fallen down temple at Shade Church is dedicated to Leviatar. It's creepy and suitably dark down there, and the Black Hats are all agitated. They say, "We have lost face," because of Captain Davage turning one of the most drooling and mindless of our ranks, Kylos of Metatron, into a lovely, loving lady of standing in the League. Married her, and she's now very popular in the League. And other League lords get it in their head, hey, if this northern guy, this Blanchford guy could do it, why couldn't I do it too? And they set off with their entourage into the Zaffin Armada to turn a Black Hat. Of course, a lot of them end up dead, but that doesn't matter. The Black Hats, who have had the absolute fear of the League, as they are evil and deadly, and no one can deal with a Black Hat except a sister until this full League Lord comes along and turns one of our most evil members. We can't have that. We need blood, and we're gonna have it. And Princess Rock appears to be in mission with these Black Hat disreputables hiding underneath the Shade Church. Princess Rock seems to be very unstable. Seems like her sanity is in question, and the Black Hats even have to spray her with some sort of medication to prop her up, to get her thoughts in order. When she's got it, she's very in command, very rational, but it fades, and the Black Hats appear to be using this to their advantage. So Princess Rock seems like she's gunning for Captain Davage and wants to give her father his head on a plate. And the Black Hats are like, well, we want Kylos of Metatron right back here on her knees, and we're gonna turn her evil again, or she is going to die. And we also want Lady Poe of Blanchford, Captain Davage's sister, because she is born of the Shadow Mark, and if you delve into Book 2, you know the story of how her father prevented her from being kidnapped by the Black Hats. The Black Hats tend to do that. If the Shadow Tech female is born, the Black Hats come for them and steal them and take them to the Shade Church and torture them, basically, and see if they survive to become a Black Hat themselves. And that never happened to Lady Poe. And they want her too. They believe she is their property, that she belongs to them, that her Shadow Tech / Silver Tech also belongs to them. And this week, Chapter 2, A Tearful Resignation. And just keep in mind, as this part of the book, the 11th Daughter, unfolds, what we learned in the first part, especially Carahil with his goal of saving a planet, and he lined up several tasks in order to accomplish this. And one was to find people he could trust and then move them into position So that is slowly taking effect, and we're seeing it manifest itself right before our eyes. The people he has selected to help him save this planet are now unwittingly being moved about the board. We'll see how that takes shape as the chapters roll along. Anywho, let's proceed immediately. Part 2, Chapter 2, A Tearful Resignation. Captain Davage had never seen Lieutenant Kylos like this before. She was a hard case, a lady who prided herself on being tough, of being in control. When she came to him 10 years prior as a Marine sergeant, she was hopeless. An uncontrollable, uncommandable, unruly wreck who had been selected by Lord Grenville to disrupt his command. She had been a test to see what Lord Blanchford was made out of. Any lord, captain or otherwise, should have thrown her out immediately. But Davage, being Davage, saw untapped potential in this tall, sad Marine from Tusk. Under his positive influence, she thrived, excelled, became skilled, and became a friend, his best friend. She had mellowed to some extent, softened in these 10 years. She allowed Davage to see her most guarded of thoughts and feelings. Still, she prided herself on keeping most things bottled up and hidden. If she had a problem, she spoke about it with him empirically, in a bland, sterile sort of way, as if it was someone else's problem, not hers. But now, Kai was truly in pain, truly panicked and unsure of herself. He'd seen her red-faced with rage, belly laughing, drunk, quizzical and stressed, but never trembling with uncertainty, tears flowing freely, her hand shaking. "Dav, I need to resign my post. Effective immediately," she said, wiping a tear away. He was thunderstruck. They sat in his office, the ship vibrating with near-launch activity, the last bits of supplies coming on board, the last-minute touch-ups of hull plating and internal tubing, and so forth. Kai sat in her chair, slumped and weeping. "May I ask what has brought this on, Kai?" "Well, my husband, Dav, he wants me to come home." "I see. He's asked you to come home before, has he not?" Kai put her face into her hands. He said he'd leave me if I didn't come home. I know it sounds strange, me being gone from home so much, but I love my husband. I don't want to lose him." Davage got up from behind his desk and sat down next to her, taking her hand. It was damp and trembling. "I'm sorry for this, Kai. I understand what you must be feeling." "No, Dav, you don't. I love this ship. I love my job. I love being here with you. You're my best friend. You're one of the few people who understands me, can see through all my crap. But I love my husband too, and he wants me home." She pushed Dav's hand away. He expecting her, knowing Kai as he did, to stand and walk away, to work it out on her own. Instead, she embraced him, putting her wet, teary face on his shoulder. "Order me to stay, Dav. Tell me I can't go," she sobbed. "I can't do that, Kai. You've served your time. Whether you stay or go is up to you. You know you will be missed. Terribly. You know you're my best friend as well." "Tell me what to do, Dav. Tell me, please. Order me to stay." She pounded his chest. Hey, Kai. I order you to be happy." Kai bitterly wept into his shoulder. "I'm sorry this had to come up. I'm sorry, right before a launch and all." "It's all right." No, it's not. This ship needs its first officer. You're too nice sometimes, Dav. You should be chewing me out right now. You should be beating the hell out of me in the gym." Well, how about if I gave you an extended leave? I could deactivate you, then you could go home, take a year or so and see what shakes loose. If you get things sorted out, then you could reactivate. But I'd be reactivating as a Marine. I'd not be here. I'd not be your first officer. No, you wouldn't. I wish I could say your job will be here waiting for you, but you know I can't. I need a first, though anybody other than you shall be a settle for. You know that, correct? Kai pulled back a little, composed herself, drew her huge SK pistol, removed the magazine, checked the chamber, and handed it to Dav. Here's my gun, Dav, since I'm not your first anymore. She looked at it hard. I never, ever thought I'd be saying goodbye to you. Davage took the SK and let it sit on his desk. She looked at it sitting there and cringed. He lifted her chin. What's this goodbye nonsense, This had better not be goodbye, Lieutenant Kylos. You and your husband are always welcome in my home. Sig and I will miss you. Kai, I must have your word that you'll not disengage and vanish into the night and be gone forever. You'll promise me I will see you at home. Kai tried to smile. I promise, my friend. I promise. They embraced. The following morning, Captain Davage and his Countess Sigillus, wearing a fine red gown, came aboard the Seeker. Usually, Davage, Sig, and Kylos made an inspection of the ship, going over everything before the ship launched. But today it was very different. Sig knew he was sad. No Kylos. She pulled him aside when she could and hugged him. She kissed him when nobody was looking, trying to cheer him up. He was grateful for her love. But things just wouldn't be the same. They entered the engineering bay. The coils thrummed and sparked with life. Commander Mapes, Lord of Grenville, came forward. David shook his hand. Lord Mapes and his wife, Lady Suzeraine, were good friends. Commander, I wanted to let you know that Lieutenant Kylos has resigned her post. What? Why? Personal reasons. I must say this is very sudden, and I'm quite at a loss to appoint anyone else. I wanted you to know that. If you weren't an appointed officer, I'd ask you to take her place, without question. Well, thank you, Dav. I appreciate that. Do you have any thoughts on the matter? Any possible candidates? Commander Mapes rubbed his chin a moment. I'll check my roster. I can't, at this point, think of anybody free to assume the role, however. Davage suspected as much. He smiled. Well, keep a weather eye out and let me know should you have any thoughts. I will. Thank you, Dav. With that, they completed their tour of the engineering bay. When they finished inspecting the ship, they made their way back to his office and closed the door. Sig, carefully arranging her gown, sat down on Davage's lap. Gently, she kissed his cheek and neck. Well, I'm at a loss, Sig. I've no idea who I'm going to get to replace Kai. Will someone on the bridge crew do? Sig purred. Probably. I was thinking about crewman Sasse from Sensing. She's very solid. Do you think she'll do as well as Kai? No, but each to their own. I'm certain she might excel in other areas. Kai was lousy at paperwork. What about crewman Sari, the helmsman? Lady Sari is just now becoming a fine helmsman. I don't want to take her from it. She seems to love it so. Do you know her father, Lord Timon of Falls, recently passed away? Milos told me. Sig was shocked. No, I didn't. Oh, the poor thing. Her father dead? Yes, I took the liberty to send her mother a basket of flowers and a note. I hope the Lady Brana is all right. You should let me have a look at those first, Dav. That's my area. He stood and put Sig down. Yes, sorry. Well, let's to the bridge and get underway. Sig looked out the window at their castle in the distance. I always hate this part. I know, Sig. They exited the office and walked a few steps to the bridge. As usual, the crew snapped to attention. Davage put them at ease, and Sig took a seat in his chair, as she always did. He signed a few reports and went to the comm station. Lieutenant Gervin manned it, as usual, for a day shift. "Comm," Davage said. Please make a note, as of this entry, Lieutenant Kylos, Lieutenant of the 12th Stellar Marines and First Officer of the Seeker, has resigned her commission and her esteemed post. There was a gasp as the crew listened. Additionally, please note that her years of service have been exemplary, and this vessel will sorely miss her presence. We will make do as best we can and will want for her wisdom and bravery. Please send to Fleet Command that Davage, Captain of the Seeker, requests suitable candidates for the post. Vacancy immediate. Also, send to crewman Hartford to assume the ops position on the day shift until further notice, and make a note in the duty roster. Aye, sir. Davage looked around. Well, there you have it. I am certain that you are all as saddened by Lieutenant Kylos' departure as I am, and I am also certain you will join me in wishing her nothing but the best. She is what is best in all of us. In the meantime, the ship sails and life goes on. I am, of course, unwillingly in the market for a new first officer. It's a tough job, a serious job, and the hours can be terrible. The responsibility is immense, and the boss is, so I'm told, a real axe-wielding closet case. The crew laughed. But as with anything, the rewards can be without limit. I have put a call out to the fleet for a replacement, as is standard procedure. However, as I hope you all are aware of, I value my crew above all. If any of you here wish to accept the challenge and throw your name into the hat for consideration, then I'd be happy to take a moment, sit with you, and hear what you have to say. As usual, my door is always open. After a moment, Davage strode to Sig's side. She was always careful not to touch him too much when on the bridge. He put his hand on her shoulder, and looking up, she lightly touched his hand. The lift door opened, and crewman Hartford entered, scurrying to the ops position. "Crewman," Davage said in a cheerful voice, "I hate to put you on the spot, but when you are ready, can you give me ship's complement? Take your time. Get settled." Hartford logged into the station and tapped a few buttons. He looked nervous and flustered. "Take your time, crewman. This isn't a race. The only danger we face is that some of the hanky waivers on the dock might have sore arms in the morning." Hartford chuckled and continued what he was doing. After a minute or two, he spoke up. "Sir, ship's complement is all present and accounted for." "Did we have any late arrivals this time?" More key tapping. "No, sir. Additionally, all provisions stowed and manifested." "Excellent. Do we owe anybody any money?" "No, sir. Paymaster Milk reports all ledgers clear." Davage smiled. Fine, and well done, crewman." He turned to crewman Jonas at the navigation post. "Navigator, status." "Sir, navigation is caged and pegged." He turned to the missive. "Missive. Report. All ship systems reading as nominal. Thank you. Please release the viewing cone and enable ship sensing." The missive worked his large but rather obsolete panel. The holographic main viewing cone came on in glorious 3D, and the various sensing stations shot to life. The missive was an endangered posting. Davage had heard the missive station was to be deleted in the next generation of ships altogether. Time moves on. He turned to blue-haired crewman Sari, standing at the helm. "Helm, status." "Sir, the helm is available and fit for travel." Davage straightened his hat. "Very well. Please send to Fleet Command. It is time for our pledge." "Aye, sir." A moment later, a fleet adjutant popped up on the cone. Resplendent in his fine blue uniform, the adjutant looked at the crew with a haughty, somber brow. The usual look from the Admiralty. Davage spoke up. "Adjutant, well met. Captain Davage reports, as of this moment, the main fleet vessel Seeker is ready and able to travel. We await our pledge." "Captain Davage, Lord of Blanchford, well met," the adjutant said in a somewhat unpleasant Remnath drawl. "So be it. As of this moment, the Admiralty acknowledges your ready status and fully expects you to perform your duty in and out of the face of the enemy. Will you submit to the pledge, sir?" "We will." "Very well. A moment, please." The cone went black and then came on. A fleet admiral appeared, wigged, powdered in his elegant blue uniform and knee breeches. It was Admiral Sai of the 10th Fleet. An admiral's uniform was very garish and civilian-like. It was a composition of a long blue coat that went to the floor, huge button and end sleeves, white hose, buckle shoes, and a massive plumed hat. He carried an admiral's command scepter. The whole ensemble was one reason why Davage never wanted to be an admiral. Davage was elated that it was Admiral Sai who was pledging them today. Sai, unlike many of the Admiralty, didn't make an overly big to-do of the pledge ceremony. Normally, he gave the pledge and sent them on their way with a minimum of fanfare. Some admirals, like the infamous Admiral Pax, liked to make a huge fiasco of it, taking hours. "Bridge," Davage barked. "Be at your guard." The bridge came to attention. Sig stood with head bowed in the traditional manner for a civilian. The admiral looked the scene over and, when satisfied, spoke. "Great Countess Sigillus, well met. You look as radiant as always." Sig responded, "Thank you, and well met, great sir. My wife informed me that an unthinkable event having to do with a throne pie occurred at a recent ball that you were graciously hosting. If true, has the throwing party been caught and appropriately penalized?" Sai was a remarkably conversational man for an admiral. Sig turned a little red. "No, great sir. However, I have a prime suspect in mind, and will deal with him when the time is right." Sai laughed. "I see. Captain Davage, well met, as usual. You, sir, are entrusted with a heavy burden, one passed down from the time of the elders to the present. I put you to the pledge. Are you ready, sir?" "I am." "Will you pledge to defend life in all its forms, wherever it is threatened?" "I pledge to do so." "Will you pledge to protect and defend League citizens wherever they may be found, and whomever they may be?" "I pledge to do so." "Will you pledge to fight the Zaphans wherever they may be found?" "I pledge to do so." "And will you pledge not to harm the Zaphans themselves, but to endure their evil as a good servant of the elders' memory?" "I pledge to do so." The admiral looked the scene over again. He seemed about ready to bow and conclude the matter when he suddenly spoke again. His image lit up with silvery light. "Captain, you are hereby pledged and bound. I entreat you to go forth and do your duty as the elders see fit. In this, Captain, you must always remember that you are pledged to defend life wherever it is threatened, regardless of position, standing, and group affiliation." "I have pledged to do so, Admiral," Davage said. "Always remember, Captain, life knows no political boundaries. Please remember that, I beg you." "I will remember that, Admiral," Davage said, puzzled. The silvery light faded and the Admiral stood there, perplexed for a moment. He then made a sweeping gesture with his scepter. "Then, so pledged and bound, may you speed well, protect the children under your command, and forget not your duty." With that, the Admiral bowed, and the cone went black, reverting after a moment to the Blanchford dock, and the crowds gathered there to see the ship depart. The cone briefly warbled. Sig seemed shocked and pointed. Davage sighed. "Always seems like that takes forever, doesn't it? At least it wasn't Admiral Pax this time." "Dav," Sig sent via telepathy. "Dav, did you see that?" The crew, still at guard, concurred. "See what, darling?" Davage smiled. "Shall I contact the Admiralty again and get him, Admiral Pax? I'm certain he'll—" "No, sir," the crew said in unison. Davage laughed. "Well then, bridge crew, be at ease." They relaxed, and Sig stood there, slightly bouncing up and down. She seemed quite in a state. "Admiral Sai." The cone switched back to his office for a brief moment, and I saw him there, spread-armed, bent-kneed, covered in pie. I know I saw it. "Sig, you will not let that pie incident drop, will you? If it bothers you so much, why don't you hit Carahill in the face with a pie of your own?" Davage walked over to Crewman Sari, his helmsman. "My lady," he said under his breath, "are you certain you are up to this with the recent passing of your father? I could arrange you some additional time off." Sari's face saddened a bit. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I am fine, please. I want to fly." Davage smiled and patted her on the shoulder. "Then take us up. 15,000 feet and hold, and mind the crowd. There's a lot of them out there this morning. I'd certainly love, for once, to give them a good friendly soaking. How about you, crewman?" "I would, sir." "You didn't see it, Dav?" Sig was hopping up and down. "I did not." Davage thought for a moment. "Well, we'll let 'em go home dry today. Take us up." "Aye, Captain," Sari said, and the Seeker, rumbling, quickly screamed up out of the water and into the cold air above the cheering masses on the dock. "Cones to ventral," Davage said, knowing that Sig liked to see the castle fade into the distance. The cone popped up, and his old Vith castle came into view as a huge, sprawling red edifice, the tumbled green of the Telmus Grove stretching off beyond the edge of the field. Sig looked at the castle fading below and gripped his hand tightly. "I'm certain I saw him there, face hit with pie." Again, "I saw nothing. Now please." "Sir," Sari said, 15,000 feet, standing at station." "Sir, the screens are clear and we are free to navigate," Sassy said from her sensing position. "Very well. Set to standard orbital tax and ease us up." "Heading, sir?" Jonas asked at the navigation station. Davage stepped away from Sig. "Well, that's a good question, crewman. Point us at planetfall and wind for 1/16 stellar Mach. I'm to the books to see if anything's hot." Davage made his way towards his office and waited. "Crewman Hartford, I require your presence in my office, sir. Please." Hartford adjusted his uniform and bustled into Davage's office, the captain following. As he entered his office, he caught a glimpse of Sig looking at him from her seat. Her eyes were big, shuffling, red hair quizzical around her head, mouth set in a long, straight line. She always wanted to come into his office with him when the ship's destination was being decided upon, but she was not allowed, just the captain and the first officer, or in this case, the ops crewman. Nobody else, not even wives, not even great countesses. With Davage getting the look from Sig, the door closed unceremoniously. Davage and Hartford sat down to discuss the ship's destination. As Hartford began reading off the hot listings on the wire, he looked up over his shoulder to the little hidden panel on the wall where he kept a tall tankard of bunked Narva. Kai. How Kai loved her Narva. And with that, we conclude Part 2, A Tearful Resignation. So, Lieutenant Kylos did a very unexpected thing. She resigned her post, decided to go on home to Onaris to see her husband, to go home, basically, to quit the Marines. And that's very unusual for Kai. Kai, as she said, loves her job. She loves faring the stars and adventuring. She loves wearing a uniform. As we see in later chapters, Kai comes from very humble, very meager origins. She was a peasant, basically, on Onaris, and she always felt her uniform, her rank, set her apart. That her status in the military and her first officer situation wiped sort of the peasant out of existence and made her feel like somebody, like she was important. Her origins, her peasant upbringing is very much in the back of her mind, and it's something she doesn't like much at all. She enjoys faring the stars and adventuring and getting into fights and seeking the unknown. She just loves the whole situation. But she also loves her planet-bound, studious husband on Onaris. He has asked her to come home before, but he's never threatened to leave her to end their marriage. So, again, you have to consider the big picture. Why now? Why is her husband forcing her basically to leave the ship? And we will find out in future episodes that everything is happening for a purpose. The pledge that Captain Davage took is something all fleet ships are supposed to do. The purview of the fleet is supposed to be to defend life, specifically from the Zaphins, those 5 planetary-sized creatures that feed on starlight and could cost the deaths of billions should they be unimpeded. And the fleet was intended to prevent that, to protect these lives, to protect life from the Zaphins. And that pledge that he took is supposed to be a reminder of that your job is to defend life and defend League citizens, and also to defend the Zaphins, as they are inviolate. They are, even though they're evil and cruel, they are the last vestiges of the old elders. And that goes back deep in League of Elder history and lore. This series is the League of Elder, and the elders were once a big part of the League's lives. The League served the elders. There were 25 of them, huge planetary-sized creatures that the precursors of the League served. They would seek out suitable stars that they could feed from, stars that had no beings or depending on that particular star for life. They always were careful that they didn't cause any harm in their feeding. That's a big difference between the elders and the Zaphins who came later, is their concern for life. There's, as I mentioned, 25 of them. When the League moved to Cana, following the elders again, they settled around the star Codis, and they began to get sick and die. They were ancient in the extreme, billions of years old, and they started to fade, and then they were replaced by these 5 Zaphins who look just like them. And some whispers and rumors is that those 5 were elders that had gone sour and decided, forget all this careful feeding and worrying about little creatures on faraway worlds. We're just going to feed and feed and feed, and whatever happens, happens. But that's unconfirmed. In the Shadowtech Goddess book, one of the destinations they were to go to was the Shrine of Boraster, and the shrine was dedicated to one of the elders, the elder Boraster, and the shrine's supposed to look like Boraster, and this is this weird alien, basically like a head covered with eyes with horns is what it looked like. But the League writings just speaks of the elders as looking like a moon, like nothing more than a celestial object. But who knows? Not according to the Shrine of Boraster. There was also Nylax, there was Tearful, there were quite a few of them, but most of them fell into lore, and leaving only the 5 Zaphins. So that's what that pledge was to the pledge that they made to the elders in years past to protect life from the Zaphins. So Captain Davage is now stuck looking for a first officer now that Kai is gone, and we'll see how that shakes out in future chapters. Next chapter, Part 2, Chapter 3, Lady Poe of Blanchford, dealing with Captain Davage's sister, Lady Poe, the mother of Carahil, and see what she's all about. We know from the previous chapter that Princess Rock is gunning for Lady Poe, eventually to drag her in irons to the Shade Church, where the Black Hats can do what they want with her, and if she dies, she dies, and they will milk her of her Shadow Tech / Silver Tech, and which they claim belongs to them. Until then, this is Ren Presents, and I am your host, Ren. Peace out.